The morning air was crisp, touched with the scent of pine and damp earth as the sun crept over the jagged cliffs that framed the quiet valley. The river below shimmered like a ribbon of molten silver, its current so slow it could have been mistaken for glass. Arthur Hayes guided his horse down the slope, his eyes scanning the ground for tracks. He had been following the trail of a wounded steer that had broken away from his herd 2 days ago. To most, this bend in the river was hidden, tucked behind rock and sagebrush where only wanderers or lost souls might find it. Arthur wasn't looking for trouble that morning. He hadn't looked for anything in years except work and silence. But fate had a way of crossing paths where it shouldn't. He reined in his horse when he heard it. Laughter. At first, faint, distant, but quickly followed by a sound that froze him mid-breath. A cry, a young woman's voice filled with fear and shame. He stiffened, leaning forward in the saddle. The cry came again, echoing across the water. Arthur's instincts, sharpened by years of living alone on the edge of civilization, took over. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to a tree, and began moving toward the sound, his boots silent on the soft earth. Through the brush, he caught sight of movement. 3 young white men standing by the river's edge, holding something that looked like a bundle of clothes. Down in the shallow water, a young Chinese woman stood half-submerged, her long, silken dark hair clinging to her back. She was clutching her arms over her chest, trembling, while the men tossed her simple tunic and trousers between them like a cruel game. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, "Please give them back," but the boys only laughed harder. Arthur's jaw tightened as a surge of anger washed through him. He recognized them, drifters from the nearby town of Scorpion's End. Lazy, wild boys who thought trouble made them men. The leader, a greasy-haired youth named Flint, smirked as he called out, "Maybe you should thank us, China woman. Folks around here don't get to see a sight like you every day." The woman turned her back, shaking. "Please, just go," she whispered, her voice trembling like a bird caught in a storm. That was enough for Arthur. He stepped from behind the rocks, his revolver drawn and his voice steady but cold as steel. "That's enough." All 3 men turned, startled. Flint sneered when he saw who it was. "Well, if it ain't old Arthur Hayes. Ain't seen you since you ran off from town to live with your cows." Arthur's tone didn't change. "Drop her clothes." Flint grinned, cocking his head. "Or what? You going to shoot me over some girl from the railroad camps? Ain't she beneath you, rancher?" Arthur took a step closer, the revolver unwavering in his grip. "I'll count to 3. By the time I finish, her clothes better be back on that rock." His voice was calm, deadly calm. The men exchanged glances, unsure if he meant it. But the way Arthur's eyes bore into them, empty and cold, made their laughter fade. "1, Arthur said quietly. The hammer clicked back. 2. Flint's smirk vanished. He threw the bundle of clothes onto the rock and backed away, muttering curses. The others followed. Arthur's gaze never left them. "Now get on your horses," he ordered. "And if I ever see you on this land again, you'll wish I hadn't." The men spat into the dirt, then mounted up and rode off, their laughter replaced by angry shouts that faded into the hills. Only when they were gone did Arthur lower his gun. He turned his back to the river and called out, "They're gone now. You can get dressed." Silence followed, broken only by the soft lap of water. Then came a faint voice. "Thank you." He stood still, facing away, until he heard her footsteps on the shore. When she finally spoke again, she was close enough that he could hear the tremble in her breath. "You didn't have to help me," she said softly. He turned then, slowly. She stood wrapped in a tattered blanket she must have had nearby, her wet hair dripping onto her shoulders. Her face was young but weathered by hardship, a bruise marked her cheek, and her eyes, dark as polished obsidian and full of sorrow, studied him wearily. She said after a moment. Arthur tipped his hat slightly. "Arthur Hayes." Her fingers clutched the blanket tighter. "They took my horse, too. While I was in the water. I didn't hear them come." Arthur handed her his canteen. "Drink." "You look worn out." She accepted it carefully, still watching him with suspicion. Trust didn't come easy to her kind, not after everything her people had suffered building the rails through these mountains. After a long pause, she asked, "Why did you help me? You could have walked away." Arthur's gaze drifted to the water. "Because once I should have helped someone, and I didn't." His voice caught faintly on the last word. The silence between them stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. The sun was climbing now, painting the cliffs gold. "You got anywhere to go?" Arthur asked, glancing at her torn clothes lying near the water. She shook her head slowly. "My family came to work on the railroad. My father died on the tracks, my mother from sickness. My brother was sold to another work crew. I've been walking since our camp was abandoned." Her words came out flat, as if she'd told herself the story so many times it had lost all meaning. Arthur looked down, jaw tightening. He'd served in the army once. He'd seen villages burn, the cries of women and children echoing in his memory long after the smoke cleared. He'd left the army because of it, swearing never to take another life unless he had to. "You can come with me," he said finally. "To my ranch. It's quiet, safe." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Why would you trust me? Many of your people hate mine." Arthur met her gaze steadily. "I'm not many people." The decision hung between them for a moment before she nodded slowly. "Then I will go." They rode together that evening, Mai sitting behind him on his horse, her arms loosely around his waist. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and dust. The journey was silent, yet it wasn't empty. Arthur could feel the weight of her exhaustion against his back, and for the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of purpose. When they reached his small ranch nestled under the red hills, the sky had turned to fire. The house was plain, weathered wood with a single porch and a corral out front, but it felt like a sanctuary. Arthur helped her down, motioning toward the door. "You can stay inside. There's stew on the stove. Ain't much, but it'll fill you." She looked around, taking in the quiet land. "It's peaceful here," she murmured. He nodded, untying his horse. "That's the idea." Inside, Mai ate slowly, almost reverently, while Arthur sat on the porch. Through the open window, he could hear her humming softly, a sad, ancient tune from her homeland that stirred something deep inside him. Later, when the stars began to pierce the dark sky, her voice fell silent. Then came the faint sound of sobbing, quiet, broken, but raw enough to pierce the night. Arthur closed his eyes, his chest tightening. He didn't move. He just whispered under his breath, "You're safe now, Mai. You're safe." The bond had begun, fragile and unspoken, but real. The sun rose over the ranch in soft shades of gold. Arthur woke early, his shoulder aching from an old bullet graze, a reminder of the life he had left behind. He stepped onto the porch and froze, watching Mai. She was already outside, feeding the horses. The morning breeze lifted her hair as she hummed that same quiet melody. There was peace in her movements, a grace that made even the restless horses still. It had been years since anyone else had moved about his land. Something about her presence made the ranch feel alive again. When she noticed him, she offered a shy smile. "You wake with the sun." He chuckled softly. "Old habits. Work starts early out here." "Then I will work, too," she said, already moving toward the barn. "You don't have to, Mai. You're my guest." She stopped and turned, her eyes steady on his. "I'm no guest. If I stay, I work." There was a quiet firmness in her tone that Arthur respected. He gave a slow nod. "Fair enough. You can help with the fences." They spent the morning working side by side. By noon, they sat beneath a cottonwood tree sharing bread and jerky. He poured her water, and she thanked him in her soft mother tongue. "Shishir," he repeated the word, his accent rough, and she laughed, a warm, unguarded sound. "You sound like a mountain coyote," she teased gently. He grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." She grew thoughtful. "My father taught me that word. He said gratitude keeps the spirit strong." Her eyes softened. "He was a good man." Arthur's smile faded. He wanted to say something comforting, but words felt clumsy. So instead, he just said, he raised a strong daughter. The compliment caught her off guard. She looked away quickly, her cheeks coloring. I don't feel strong. Strength ain't always loud, Arthur replied. Sometimes it's just keeping on. But peace in the West was a fragile thing. 3 days later, the distant thunder of hooves echoed from the ridge. Arthur's body tensed. 3 riders were coming fast. Flint and his men. Get inside, he said sharply. She froze. It's them. Yes, he said, pulling his revolver. Go. But before she could move, the men were already within shouting distance. Hayes! Flint bellowed. You think you can play hero for some foreign filth and get away with it? She belongs back in the dirt where she came from. Before Arthur could answer, one of Flint's men raised his rifle. The shot cracked through the air, splintering wood near Arthur's head. Mai screamed. Arthur fired back, grazing Flint's shoulder. The world erupted into chaos. Arthur ducked behind a trough, blood dripping from a fresh wound in his arm. Stay down, he shouted to Mai, but she didn't listen. Seeing him bleeding, something inside her snapped. She grabbed Arthur's rifle from the barn wall, knelt low, and aimed. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. She breathed once, then pulled the trigger. The first shot hit one of the men in the leg. Another bullet flew past Flint's head. Let's get out of here, one man shouted. Flint glared back, hatred burning in his eyes. This ain't over, rancher, he snarled before galloping off. When silence fell, Arthur staggered to his feet. He looked at Mai, who still held the rifle. You shoot like your father taught you, hey, he said, trying to smile. She dropped the gun and ran to him. And you fight like a man who doesn't want to anymore. In the days that followed, Mai attended to him. She cleaned the wound, cooked, and made sure he rested. The silence that once haunted the ranch was replaced by the soft rhythm of their voices and shared laughter. He watched her often, how her eyes lit up at the sight of a hawk in the sky. She had seen so much loss, yet she still found beauty in living. That, Arthur thought, was real courage. One evening as the sun bled into the hills, Mai stood at the fence. Arthur joined her.